How can a country go from being one of the most modern societies in the Middle East to becoming one of the strictest religious regimes in the world? Back in the 1960s and 1970s, Iran was actually going in a completely different direction from what most people think of today. Schools and colleges were growing bigger, cities were getting fancier, and if you walk down the streets of Tehran, you'd see a really lively society that was influenced by things happening all around the world. And here's the part that might really surprise you. On those same streets, it was totally normal to see women wearing short skirts, stylish dresses, and cool modern hairstyles. None of that matches the picture most people have of Iran today. And that makes us ask one big question. How did everything change so fast? Today, we're going to find out what Iran was actually like before the 1979 revolution, and why a country that looked like it was heading toward a modern future ended up going through one of the most extreme political changes of the entire 20th century. But before we get started, make sure you subscribe to Talk History. After that, drop a comment and tell us what other cool stories you'd like to learn about on the channel. Okay, now let's go back together to Iran in the 1970s. Picture a busy street lined with coffee shops, bookstores, and movie theaters. Young people are walking by shiny store windows, some wearing jeans, others in sharp suits. On college campuses, you can hear people talking loudly about big ideas like philosophy, politics, and science. Women are going to class, working in offices, and driving cars. In restaurants, Western pop music is playing right alongside traditional Persian tunes. It sounds like it could be a scene from a city in Europe in the 1960s, but it's not. It's Tehran. For a big chunk of the 20th century, Iran was going through fast and surprising changes that caught the whole world's attention. During the 1960s and 1970s, the country started showing a side of itself that broke a lot of stereotypes people had about the Middle East. Colleges and universities were growing fast, more people were getting educated, and the capital city of Iran was becoming one of the most exciting cultural spots in the whole region. For a lot of people visiting from other countries, Tehran felt like a buzzing, energetic city. There were theaters, art galleries, cultural festivals, and a nightlife that reminded people of big cities in Europe. The streets were full of students, thinkers, business people, and professionals, all part of a society that was becoming more and more connected to the rest of the world. Women were also starting to show up more in public life. Many of them were going to universities and working in hospitals, schools, and government offices. In the big cities, seeing a woman working professionally was no longer something unusual. All of this made it look like Iran was entering a brand new chapter in its story. This ancient country, one that came from one of the most important civilizations ever, was trying to find its new place in the modern world. Between royal palaces, new buildings, and streets filled with cars, the country was trying to show itself as a powerful, modern nation, proud of where it came from, but also looking ahead to the future. But behind all this shiny progress, there were deep problems hiding underneath. The changes were happening incredibly fast. In just a few years, the country's economy, schools, and culture were being completely flipped around. For some people, this felt like an amazing opportunity. For others, it felt like things were moving way too fast and leaving behind traditions that had shaped who Iranians were for generations. Modernization was moving ahead quickly, but not everybody was keeping up with it. And in that gap, between the people who loved the changes and the people who were scared of them, the first cracks in a much bigger and more complicated story were starting to show. Because what looked like a simple move toward being modern was actually shaking up an entire society in a very deep way. To understand how Iran became one of the most lively and modern societies in the Middle East during the 20th century, we have to look at the man who was running the whole country. His name was Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. He had been educated in Europe, and he truly believed that Iran's future depended on becoming modern. He dreamed of a strong, industrialized country that could stand tall next to the most powerful nations in the world. His plan was simple. Iran had to change. And it had to change fast. And for that to happen, the changes had to go really deep. In the 1960s, the government launched a big set of changes called the White Revolution. Even though it had the word revolution in its name, it wasn't a revolution the way most people think of one. It was actually a huge program to change Iranian society and its economy. And it was being driven from the very top of the government, not from the people. These changes included giving land to regular farmers that used to belong to rich landowners, building more schools and universities, putting up new roads and buildings, and pushing the country hard toward becoming an industrial nation. Millions of poor farmers got land that had previously been owned by wealthy people. New schools and colleges started popping up all over the country. The whole goal was to speed up development, and for a while, it actually seemed to be working. Money coming in from oil helped pay for huge projects. Highways, hospitals, airports, and factories were being built everywhere. Cities were growing at a jaw-dropping speed. Tehran started filling up with modern buildings, and a growing middle class was starting to enjoy the benefits of all this economic growth. The government also pushed for important changes in everyday social life. Women got the right to vote and started taking part more actively in public life. New laws made it easier for them to go to school and get jobs. To many people watching from other countries, it looked like Iran was becoming a shining example of what a modern Muslim country could look like. But these changes also stirred up a lot of trouble. Some traditional groups, especially religious leaders, watched all of this happening with serious worry. They were scared that the country was throwing away its cultural and religious values in favor of ideas and lifestyles copied from the West. For them, modernization wasn't just changing the economy or politics, it was changing the very soul of the country. While the government was busy celebrating all this progress, a quiet but growing debate was spreading through Iranian society. Just how much should the country change itself in order to become modern? The answer to that question ended up splitting an entire generation in two. Iran's image to the outside world in the 1970s was that of a modern, energetic country that was growing fast. But that image didn't show the full picture. Sure, the streets of Tehran were full of new cars, and fancy international hotels were welcoming visitors from all over the world. But at the same time, all the real political power was being tightly held by the Shah and his closest circle. Iran's political system was a monarchy, meaning the Shah was the king and had strong control over how the country was run. Even though there were official institutions like a parliament, the most important decisions were still being made directly by the Shah and the people around him. Elections existed, but political competition was very limited. Political parties had to follow strict rules, and if someone openly criticized the government, they could end up in serious trouble. One of the most feared parts of the government was an intelligence organization called Savak. This agency's job was to keep an eye on people who might be threats to the government, find political opponents, and keep a tight grip on any political movement seen as dangerous. For many people in Iran, knowing that this kind of organization was watching made life feel tense and uncomfortable. On top of that, the economic growth wasn't spreading equally to everyone. As cities grew quickly, millions of people moved from the countryside hoping to find a better life. But many of them ran into a tough reality. Not enough homes, not enough jobs, and prices that kept going up. Modernization had created wealth, but it had also made certain gaps between people even wider. In some parts of Tehran, there were shiny new buildings and fancy shopping centers. In other neighborhoods, the poorer ones, people who had just arrived from the countryside were struggling just to get by. This contrast started to make people uncomfortable. While some folks were celebrating how far the country had come, others were starting to wonder, is this progress actually helping everybody? Modernization kept pushing forward, but more and more people started looking behind the pretty, glittery surface of all that development. And what they found didn't always match the rosy picture the government was painting for the rest of the world. When things change too fast in a society, people often react in ways nobody expected. In Iran, that reaction started showing up in several different places all at once. In universities, lots of students were talking about democracy, inequality, and political freedom. They were picking up ideas from intellectual movements happening in Europe and Latin America, and some young people started questioning whether their country's political system was actually working for them. In more nationalist circles, people were criticizing how close the government had gotten to Western powers. Some felt that Iran was losing control over its own decisions on the world stage, but the most powerful opposition started coming from a place many people hadn't seen coming: the world of religion. Inside the Shia Muslim religious community, there were important figures watching the direction of the country with deep unease. For them, the government's version of modernization wasn't just a change in economics or politics, it was a huge cultural shift that could change the role religion played in Iranian life forever. One cleric who was getting more and more attention for his powerful speeches was Ruhollah Khomeini. He spoke out loudly against the Shah's policies, even from exile, and warned people that the country was drifting away from its religious roots. His messages started spreading among students, merchants, and religious communities who shared the same worries. However, the people who opposed the government weren't one united group. They had very different ideas from each other. Some just wanted moderate political reforms, small changes to make things fairer. Others wanted much more radical, sweeping changes to society. And still others wanted to protect the traditional values they felt were being threatened by modernization. The one thing they all had in common was a growing sense that something was wrong. Iran was still modern in a lot of ways, but more and more voices were starting to question where the country was really headed. And when a whole society starts asking too many big questions at the same time, political stability can turn out to be a lot more fragile than it looks. For a big part of the 20th century, Iran went through one of the fastest transformations in its entire history. In just a few decades, a deeply traditional society began going through major, radical changes. Bigger schools and universities, faster city growth, rapid industrialization, and a cultural openness that connected the country to the rest of the world. Colleges filled up with students. Cities spread out in all directions. Women started playing more and more visible roles in public life. New generations started dreaming about a different kind of country. Iran looked like it was heading straight toward a modern future, but history almost never moves in a straight, clean line. The very same changes that powered all that growth also created deep and serious tensions. Fast modernization, unequal sharing of wealth, political control by the government, and the clash between old traditions and new ways of life. All of these things together started creating a feeling of uncertainty inside Iranian society. This ancient country, one that had always been deeply proud of its culture and religious identity, found itself facing really hard questions about what it wanted its future to look like. What from the past should be kept? What should be changed? And who actually got to decide the direction of an entire nation? By the late 1970s, Iran was still showing the world its shiny, modern face. Bright streets, full universities, growing industries, and a cosmopolitan capital city that seemed to compete with the greatest cities on Earth. But underneath that surface, tensions that had been building for years were already starting to transform the country's political and social climate in very big ways. Iran was still a country full of contradictions, tradition and modernity living side by side, prosperity next to inequality, cultural openness sitting right next to political control. And right in the middle of all those contradictions, the country was slowly but surely moving toward a moment that would change everything. A moment that would change not just Iran's destiny, but the entire political balance of the Middle East. Because by the end of that decade, without most people even realizing it, the whole nation already had one foot right on the edge of revolution. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this video and love this kind of content, subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next videos and can discover even more fascinating stories. See you in the next video.